RGB fans, RGB motherboards, RGB RAM, RGB GPUs, RGB sound card, RGB power supplies, RGB SSDs. Hey, what is going on, OCNers? This is Blue Devil. Welcome back to the channel. Yeah, I said that right. RGB SSDs. So it's a thing. Team Group thinks so. So let's take a look at the 250 gigabyte model of the Delta RGB. So the Delta RGB SSD that features addressable RGBs. So this works with the 5-volt systems on most motherboards that are coming out now. This motherboard that I'm running it on is the Asus Z370 Maximus X code. Pretty sweet motherboard, has two 5-volt RGB connections as well as two of 12-volt ones. Keynote: do not plug in a 12-volt connection into a 5-volt addressable RGB. You will kill the RGB. With that said, this SSD is just like any other SATA 6 SSD. It performs 560 megabytes per second on the read, 510 on the write. Pretty standard. I'm not going to go into performance numbers because we've all seen all those performance numbers from SATA 6 SSDs. They pretty much saturate the SATA 6 architecture. So moving on to actual addressable RGB, pretty much which this video is all about. The SSD features 8 addressable LEDs spread throughout the kind of a cloudy diffuser. This is a pretty aggressive SSD or SSD styling approach, but then again, addressable RGB is pretty aggressive as well too. So as far as branding on it, you see the Delta branding on the very bottom, followed by the TForce logo in the very middle, and then you have the non-lit up TForce logo on the very top. So if I was going to continue this trend, I would have probably made sure the TForce logo actually lit up as well too, but it's a little thicker unit as intended because of the RGB functions to it. So if you're going to install it in your laptop, which I don't understand why you would, it's more meant for a display purpose. So like on this H500P here, in the very bottom, you'd kind of want to fill up that void instead of putting in a LED strip or a plain Jane SSD. An RGB SSD kind of helps fill that lighting void. Also, with it facing up like that, you might be able to get a little more RGB maybe on your video card or other components in your system, maybe highlighting other things like that. So I really do think components that feature RGB or addressable RGB are going to be taking over the market instead of seeing LED strips. So with that said, let's go ahead and we're going to cut to me taking this thing apart. I want to see how this thing ticks. From what I read on the internet, it has 8 addressable RGBs, so I want to see what that is. And then for kicks, I want to see what the controller is on the SSD itself. So let's cut to that. Alright, so inside the box you do get your cable with a 3-pin addressable connector, which you'll notice that one of the connectors is blocked out, so you can't plug in a 12-volt connection. On the other end, it is a VDG cable, so if you want to hook it up to your motherboard, if it requires a little bit different connector. And then going over here, it terminates to a USB micro, so and that would plug in to the bottom of the SSD. So power, you can still power the SSD without the included 5-volt adapter, but you're not going to have any of the RGB functions. So yeah, inside the box, a registration card, a sticker, and then instructions on how to mount it, how it looks like it in your case, and then how to hook it up via your different 12-volt for the Delta S, Delta, and Delta X. So we'll be looking at the Delta model today. I've already had it hooked up already, so you've seen that in the intro. But let's get to taking this thing apart. Alright, so we actually have the controller here, and for what I've noticed, it runs a Silicon Motion 2258H-AB controller, while SK Hynix has some sort of controller in here as well too, but Micron actually supplied the memory modules for this one. So interesting. 7WB2D, and then underneath that is MW852. So if any of your keyboard warriors out there want to figure out what kind of memory's on there, there you go. All right, so here is the addressable headers. So you got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Like I said earlier, pretty simple board design. White PCB to it to match the diffuser. Suppose if you really wanted to mod this, you could take this off and it wouldn't look so cloudy. So RGB SSDs are a thing. Are addressable SSDs for everybody? No. I'm more of a set it to one color kind of guy and move on from there, but to each their own. So as far as a rating goes for this guy, I'm gonna rate it 4.5 out of 5 flames. It was enjoyable. It seems well built. A pretty good implementation. The only thing I would knock a half a flame off for is probably the software, and that's not any issue on its own, because Asus Aura Sync was hit or miss, but realistically it's a nice SSD once it's getting going. So with that said, go ahead and toss us a like, comment in the comment section below if you're yay or nay for this kind of thing. We have a lot of future content planned, so please consider subscribing, and I will catch you guys in the next one.